hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist war has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist war has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist war has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist war has got to go. All right. I want to invite up our first speaker. Is Stephen Kinzer here? Not yet? All right, then I'm going to invite up Ryan Costello from the Coalition to stop the genocide in Yemen.
Hey, thank you, everybody. It's really great to see people out here today standing up against war with Iran. I mean, this thing is so ridiculous. We had the Gulf of Tonkin 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0 with this supposed sabotage of the oil ships. The guy, the Japanese capitalist who owns the oil tankers, he said he didn't think it was Iran who did it. So the US can't even get their ducks in a row to get the whole story together and get the justification for this war straight. But we know what the basic justification is. Ever since the Iranian people overthrew the Shah and kicked out US corporate interests, the US government has been trying to get back in to control Iran's oil and gas, but more than their natural resources. The goal of the US government and the US corporate interest is to control the people, control their labor, and extract all the profits they can from the blood, sweat, and tears of the Iranian people. It's to this day they haven't forgotten that the people kicked out the Shah. And we should celebrate, actually, the fact, the people here in the U.S. should celebrate the fact that the Iranian people kicked out a U.S.-backed dictator in their country. This was a great thing. Even if you don't support the current Iranian government, overthrowing a U.S.-sponsored, CIA-backed dictator, the people doing this is a positive thing. And now the U.S. is saying, Iran, if you don't do what we want, we're going to put sanctions on you. In fact, they already have. Now, sanctions are often presented as a reasonable and non-violent alternative to military intervention. Well, that's a bunch of crap. All you need to do is look at what Mike Pompeo said, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is roughly it. He said, basically, the Iranian government needs to choose between playing ball with U.S. corporate interests and letting their people starve. Now, this might seem typical from Mike Pompeo. He's a real pig, he's a real warmonger. But actually, the U.S. sanctions have always operated this way. All you need to go back to is Bill Clinton's presidency. Yes, a Democrat, same sort of policy. They imposed sanctions on Iraq. On 60 Minutes, Madeleine Albright was asked, 500,000 children have died as a result of sanctions on Iraq, U.S. sanctions. This was during the 90s. Was it worth it? That's more children than died in the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know what she said? A Democrat. She said, yes, it's worth it. It's a tough decision, but it was worth it. So this is the logic of the U.S. war machine. This is the logic of the U.S. empire, that people should be starved to death if their governments don't play ball with U.S. corporate interests. It's ridiculous, it's absurd, and it's criminal. It really is criminal. And if you don't believe me, actually it's criminal by U.S. law what's happening with many of the wars going on around the world. But it's criminal in a broader sense, in the sense that it's not right for the people. Even if they have legal justification, even if they can change the laws one way or another to justify slaughter, we should be clear that sanctions, that imperialist wars, that genocides, even if they're justified by some flimsy legal pretext, are wrong. They're fundamentally wrong. And so now the U.S. is gearing up for war with Iran. They've been gearing up for a long time. It seems like it may happen relatively soon. And this is a very, very, very dangerous situation. A lot of people have correctly pointed out all the parallels to the buildup with the Iraq war, the phony evidence, the media scramble, the thinly veiled pretext for imperialist aggression to seize fossil fuels. But the situation is actually much more dangerous because right now the global situation is very unstable. The US government, along with other imperialist governments around the world, have been building up for World War III. The US has increased the military budget by $70 billion last year, by $80 billion the year before. They're really planning for it. They're modernizing the nuclear weapons arsenal. We see incredibly high tensions between empires, with the conflicts between Russia and the US in Eastern Europe, with the conflicts between the US and China in the South China Sea. And this situation in Iran could really spark World War III. So a lot is on the line. Now, there's a basic point here that people sometimes miss, which is a lot of the US propaganda about Iran focuses on criticizing the Iranian government. I don't support the Iranian government. I don't think they represent the interests of their people. But even in the case where there's the most reactionary governments in place, U.S. invasions and military interventions have always made the situation worse. You cannot liberate a people by invading their country. This is a basic and fundamental point. Look at the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Look at Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was a CIA-backed stooge who stopped playing by the CIA's rules, and so the U.S. invaded. Yeah, he was a repressive, awful person. He didn't represent the Iraqi people. But guess what? A U.S. invasion that slaughtered 1 or 2 million Iraqis or more did not make the country better for them. It never will. Any U.S. invasion never will. Now, I just want to end on one final point. A number of people have been talking about the need to get rid of Trump. That Trump is terrible, he's an idiot, he's a bigot, you know, he's just a real buffoon. But I think we should look back at the election of Barack Obama. At that time, there was a huge anti-war movement opposing the Iraq War, opposing the war in Afghanistan. I was young, I was 18 years old. I was so excited. After 8 years of Bush, I couldn't wait for Obama to get elected. I really believed in his message of change, that he was going to end the wars, that he was going to make things better. But if we look at it, he didn't. He expanded the wars. He continued and expanded domestic surveillance. He did far more drone strikes than Bush ever did. He expanded the military budget. He massively increased fossil fuel production. Now, some people may say, okay, but the Republicans stopped him from doing what he really wanted to do. I don't really buy that, but even if you do, I think that we need to be square that a presidential election is not the solution to the problems of U.S. imperialism. The only way we're seriously going to stop these problems is through mass movements, really building up the anti-war movement. This is our most important task right now as we careen towards World War III. We need to get people in the streets, and we need to work to build a very broad-based movement. If you go back to the movements in, for example, against the war in Vietnam, and you look at those people who marched to Washington, D.C. and all around the country to oppose the war in Vietnam, you had college students, you had anti-war activists, you had veterans, you had members of the Black Panther Party, you had coal miners from West Virginia, you had ministers, you had people from all across different segments of society coming together to oppose the U.S. genocide in Southeast Asia. Now, as we careen towards World War III, I think it's important that we learn from the past successes and failures of the anti-war movement. During the Iraq War, the movement to oppose the Iraq War, we put too much faith in the politicians. Yes, some of them might move once in a while, but it's the mass movement that forces them to move. And if we let our movement fizzle out when someone who promises change gets elected, then inevitably that change won't come. We need to really build up the anti-war movement. We can't get conned into believing that 2020 is our solution. It's only through seriously building up this movement, through linking up with broad sections of the population, through going amongst people who aren't yet involved in the anti-war movement and organizing amongst them. Only in this way can we seriously build up the anti-war movement in a way that's going to stop this war with Iran and stop the world rush to World War III. So power to the people and no war with Iran. Thank you very much.
No more war! 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 All right. Want to invite up our next speaker, journalist Stephen Kinzer. Yeah.
Great to see you all out here. We always ask ourselves, what can we do? You know, we're so frustrated with what's happening in the world, and we have a little chance to do something little, like be here today. It's very important that we all turn out. This spiraling crisis with Iran has, to me, as it's the most salient aspect, the fact that it is completely fabricated. It is built up from absolutely nothing. The people of Iran have not done anything to Americans. They pose no threat to the United States, and yet this entire crisis has been fabricated as a way to involve Americans in yet another Middle Eastern war. It used to be that we went to war on the basis of a lie. Remember, we had to go to war in Vietnam because of the North Vietnamese Navy attacked our warships in international waters. We had to go to war in Nicaragua because the Sandinistas were going to bring communism to Texas. We had to go to war in Iraq because Saddam was the one who bombed us on 9/11. All of those were lies. But this time we don't even get a lie. We are not even deserving of a lie. They have not even come up with an explanation or an excuse for it. The entire strategy for this war is to continue to provoke Iran and keep building up the provocations until some point when Iran will feel obligated to reply, and then we will use that as our pretext for attacking. So Iran is in a very difficult position, whether to continue to restrain itself or at some point respond. Now, I mentioned the people of Iran. This is undoubtedly the most pro-American population in the entire Middle East. If anybody has been to Iran, they will tell you when the people in Iran find out you're American, they start jumping with joy. They want selfies with you. Tehran was the only city in the Muslim world where people came out voluntarily by the thousands on 9/11 to carry candles in memorial for the victims. Iran is a country that when you look at a map in the Middle East shows you it's the big country right in the middle. There is never going to be stability in the Middle East without a security architecture that takes Iran into account. Why then are we pursuing this project? I really believe that Iran's great sin is that it's not going along with American policies in the Middle East. Overall, this is our real goal. We cannot stand countries in any part of the world that have their own agendas. We insist that leaders of all countries place the interests of the United States ahead of the interests of their own countries. And when they place the interests of their own countries first, we consider them enemies. Now, any kind of a war with Iran would have devastating consequences for a population that has never harmed us. Just recently, I spoke to someone who'd been in Iran who told me the word I would use to describe the mood in Iran now is bewilderment. What did we do? How did we get into this position where we're considered enemies of humanity when all we ever did was try to live decent lives? Iranian society looks much more like ours than the societies of many of our so-called allies in the Middle East. Not only will the Iran war bring nothing for Iranians, it brings nothing for the United States. I don't mind America making its foreign policy on the basis of what's good for the United States. Only caveat is, let's think what really is good for us over the long run and not do things that make us feel good for a minute, but actually wind up devastating our own national security. Why did we get into this situation? If the deepest reason is the corruption of our political system. This is not a one-off. This is not an accident. We are being dragged into these kinds of wars because of a political system that has been subverted by defense contractors and others who have tried to subcontract American foreign policy out to other countries. So therefore, the answer that we need to take away from this event is don't stop here. Take this home. Take it back to your congressional candidates. Refuse to support any presidential candidate who is not committed to returning the United States to the Iran deal. Do not allow yourselves to become complacent at this difficult moment. We are at a moment of decision now. We are threatening to carry out a military action against a country that threatens us not at all. Please take this opportunity to stand up for what's good for America, what's good for Iran, what's good for peace, and realize that war in Iran solves no problems and makes all of our biggest problems in the world even worse. Go home and fight.
Let's hear it for Stephen Kinzer. No war with Iran. 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 Stephen Kinzer said it. This is not a one-off. We've been down this road before. You know, not too long ago, we went to war with Iraq. What happened? Absolute disaster, that's right. From everyone I've heard from, military experts, they say a war with Iran would be perhaps 10 times worse. Iran is a country with a population 3 times larger than Iraq. Iran is a mountainous country, a country that will resist U.S. imperialism. Now, the Trump administration seems to think that he can just flippantly strike Iran, maybe kill 100, 200 Iranian citizens. But what would happen if that strike had gone through? 10 minutes. The planes were in the air. 10 minutes was the difference between war and peace. And strikes are still being considered as we speak today. If that happens, Iran will fight back. And things could quickly devolve and spiral out of control. Right now is the time. We have to stop this before it begins. If we strike them, they'll strike back at us. And then we'll be at war, and who knows how long it can go on, right? The Iraq War, they declared mission accomplished after less than 1 year. And yet still, we have troops in Iraq. If we strike Iran, we may be at war for the next generation. The time to prevent that war is right now. So I want to thank everyone for coming out today. It's great that you came out to a rally, but I want you to keep it up after you leave today. Spread the word to your family and friends, to the people that trust you. Let them know about what you heard today. Call up your member of Congress. Find out if they've been speaking out about this. It's easy. If you haven't heard from them, call them up and tell them to make some noise. All our Congress people, they claim to be resistors to Trump. But you know what? I really haven't heard enough from them. So please, call them up. Tell them, make some noise. Tell them, stand up to Trump. And if they don't, tell them you're going to vote for somebody else. Because that's all they understand, right? They just want to hang on to their jobs. But if they are not willing to stand up to Trump at this critical moment, then they're not worth voting for. So please, I don't want to talk for too long. I'm going to pass it over right now to someone I think you all know, a committed anti-war activist and former presidential candidate for the Green Party. Give it up for Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you all so much for being here today. Because what happens depends on us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Trump and the Republicans are not doing it for us. The opposition party is not acting like an opposition party. We need to be that social movement that drives political change. And thank every one of you so much for being that force and that power, which our future really depends on. We had a big wake-up call on Thursday. We were at the brink of war without knowing it, when Trump was about to unleash the missiles and the bombs and a big military attack on Iran because of a drone that had been shot down. Why was that drone shot down? We don't know. Well, exactly. We don't know. There are conflicting stories here. This is part of many conflicting stories without evidence. But even if it was the worst case scenario, even if that drone was outside of territorial waters, even if it was, does that justify an attack on Iran? No, it does not. International law says you have to be immediately at risk for attack. And besides, Iran was looking at a drone that was on its border, if not over its border, after Trump had said that he was prepared to annihilate Iran after we had sent the USS Abraham Lincoln, a battleship, an aircraft carrier with B-52 bombers, after we had imposed life-threatening sanctions on Iran, after we're really pulling out all the stops. Iran is supposed to wait until they're actually being bombed to fight back. Would we wait if there was a Russian or Chinese or Iranian drone at our border? No way. You know, they're debating, was it 8 miles or was it 12 miles? That's the difference that they're talking about. Would we permit a Russian drone or a Chinese or Iranian drone within 12 miles of our border? No way. You know, we have been in the business of tearing down international law, but we're in a historical moment where we have a choice. That choice is the rule of law or the law of the jungle. And it needs to be the former and not the latter, especially in the age of nuclear weapons. And thank you all for being here to stand up for that international law, for human rights, and for diplomacy. As the previous speakers were saying so beautifully, and they really covered all the bases here, this is just a poster child of U.S. foreign policy. We are in the business of dominating economically and militarily the rest of the world, but we live in a multipolar world. We are no longer in a unipolar world. So we are heading on a collision course right now for a number of other countries, some of whom are armed with as many nuclear weapons as we have, and then there's the growing power of China. This is not how we want to navigate the future. We really need to have a set of international laws. That's what we built. We built that after the Second World War so that we wouldn't go through another war that was going to be killing tens upon tens of millions of people world over. That's why we have international law. So it's really important for us to stand up for that international law and for a future that will actually work. Because look at the price we are paying. What is that price? Do you know what you paid on your last income tax bill? So if you go back 2 years when it was last analyzed, the average American was paying $3,400 on your income tax bill for the Pentagon, and you were paying $80 of your income tax for social welfare programs, $40 for the EPA. Just consider that. $3,400 for the Pentagon, $80 for social programs, and $40 for the EPA. And what is the Pentagon doing with that money? We spent trillions on the previous regime change wars, about $5 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what did we get? Worse terrorist threats, failed states, mass refugee migrations. That's what we are buying with our hard-earned tax dollars. So we need to not only stand up and say, no war, no how. Right now, we need to say it's time to cut the friggin' military budget in half and put those dollars where they belong, in our schools, creating health care for everyone as a human right. How many want to bail out students locked into predatory student loan debt? Not just students, adults, seniors whose Social Security is being garnished for their student loan debt, which is unpayable in the economy that we have. So we need to be doing better things with that money. We need a government that is of, by, and for the people. We need to take our democracy back. As the other speakers were saying, let this be a beginning, not an end. And by the way, if you want to feel good on the 4th of July, I know many of us don't feel so great on the 4th of July. We don't feel like we have a lot to celebrate, but you know what? We are going to be celebrating with an anti-imperialist 4th of July picnic on the banks of the Charles, and I'll have a flyer here in a moment to distribute to you. That's where we build community. That's where we connect our communities, across the universes of struggle for immigrant rights, for labor rights, for LGBTQ rights, for Black Lives Matter, for all of us, for students and seniors, and for peace and justice and democracy. We can create an America and a world that works for all of us the minute we stand up together and insist on nothing less and take our democracy back. They want you to be silent. They want you to feel blamed and shamed if you don't vote for more of the same. But forget it. Independent third parties don't take votes away. We expand the vote by bringing in people who otherwise have nothing to vote for. So build the social movement, but don't neglect your political power, because if we let them off easy, they will continue to rake us over the coals and throw us under the bus. But the minute we get together, we have the power, we have the numbers, we have the agenda. 100 million Americans are not voting. That is the largest voting bloc right there. 100 million Americans. This is about standing up for the America and the world we deserve, a world of peace, justice, and democracy. Let's make it so. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. No war with Iran. 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 Hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist wars have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist wars have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist wars have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Imperialist wars have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The sanctions have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The sanctions have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The sanctions have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The sanctions have got to go. All right. All right, next up, I'm going to invite Mojgan Haji from the National Iranian-American Council.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mojgan Haji. I'm a volunteer with National Iranian-American Council. I wanted to bring a different perspective to all of what has been said. I was born and raised in Iran. I moved to the United States when I was 16 years old. That was 30-some, close to 40 years ago. I left Iran right around when Iran was involved with the war with Iraq. We had, at nights, we had to shut the lights off so we won't get bombed. We had to board up our windows. We were afraid. We would take shelter in the basement. We would listen to the bombs falling on our heads, on our buildings, in a big city, in Tehran. Tehran has grown a great deal since I left 36 years ago. It's got millions and millions of people there. Iranians are not our enemies. I'm Iranian-American. I know Iranians. Iranians do love Americans. They do not like American policy. They do not like US policy. Iranians have suffered because of 1953 coup that ruined our country. I'm here. I love this country. I'm gonna fight for this country till the end. And I'm gonna fight for this, for the friendship of the two countries. They may never be friends, but I don't want them to fight each other. I love both countries and I want peace. 1953 coup, which was not known for many years in the United States. We knew it. It left a major scar in our lives. We love United States, but we hate their policies because it's ruined our lives and it continues to ruin our lives. Whether we're here as Iranian-Americans or whether we're in Iran, they're suffering. Sanctions are literally killing people. I can give you an example. I'm on Twitter. I saw a tweet from a Iranian journalist on her personal account. She is looking for medications for her mother. By the way, my day job is a pharmacist. I'm a pharmacist. I see elderly patients in their homes. I visit them. So for me to see that, it was painful. Later, sure. So what I saw on the Twitter, this woman is looking for her mother's medication. Is dirt cheap in the United States. It's nothing. I responded to her. I gave her some options. I said, talk to your doctor. These could be your options. This woman is looking for medications, dirt cheap medications that we throw away here for her mother, life-saving medications. This is what sanctions does to people. It doesn't do anything to the Iranian government. They're not going to be touched. It's the people who are going to pay for it. I have a family member, a distant family member, but yet she's still a family member. A woman in her 40s, she's got breast cancer. She doesn't know when her next treatment is coming. She has no idea if she's going to survive. This is literally killing people. This is killing people, and we can't continue this. If we're going to go to war with Iran, this is it. If we can stop this, we can stop any other war against Iran. I want to tell you a little bit about Shah regime. Shah, in 1953, after democratically elected prime minister was overthrown and Shah of Iran was installed by United States. Then it had, Shah of Iran was brutal. My father nearly didn't make it. He was an activist. And he almost got caught. And people who were being caught by SEVAK, which was Shah's secret service, people would disappear. You would have no idea where they're going to end up, or you ever see your loved ones. My father almost lost his life. But thankfully, his younger sister, looking for him on the street to tell him, go, run away. They're coming after you. Run away. This is what we lived with. Growing up, it was a known fact. Nobody had to teach you this. You knew you need to keep your mouth shut. Otherwise, you're going to disappear. That's what Shah did to Iranian. Shah may have been a good ally to the United States government. He was a terrible person to its own people. The Evin prison, the notorious prison, was filled. To this day, that prison is still filled with different type of activists. So we have a lot of work to do, but this is it. One of the other things that really disturbs me, besides war and the big regional implications, is that Iranian civil society, they are fighting their battles. Their women movements, their social justice movements happening right now in Iran. But guess what's happening right now? The grip is becoming tighter. Government finds the excuse of United States attacking them to suppress those people, to oppress those movements. That is literally killing those movements. If we're trying to help Iranian people, this is not the way to do it. This is not the way to support Iranian people, because what we're doing, we're actually killing these civil societies that they're doing their fight. They're fighting their own government. They're fighting oppression. So having said all of that, I want to tell you it's been a really emotional last few days for me. I actually broke down this morning because the stress of United States and Iran going to war is tremendous. It's tremendous. I can't even put words to it. I've worked so hard to bring the two countries together, to bring peace together, to peacefully these two countries to at least talk to each other. When they don't talk to each other, misunderstandings happen and war breaks out. We want to avoid that. So what is it that we can do? We need to be active. For you to show up here is fantastic. Please talk to other people. There are a lot of reasonable people out there who don't know, they don't have enough information. And unfortunately, our media is not giving right information. They're not giving the whole picture. They take a slice of something that happened and they expand on it. But they don't give you context. Talk to people, learn. If you know Iranians, talk to them, see what they say. Congress need to hear from us. Congress only responds only if they can hear from us. Call them, tell them what you feel about war. Even if there's a bill in Congress that stops the war and you don't totally agree with it, you still can call and say, I do not want to pay for another war. We have people right here in this park. I see homeless people. That's painful. They're veterans. I see veterans at my work. I know what they're struggling with. Their PTSD, they have tremendous amount of mental health, and that affects their physical health. They're all related. I see it. I'm pained by them going through that. I have 3 sons in their 20s, and each one of them knows somebody in U.S. Armed Forces. When I see their friends in armed forces, my heart breaks. I want to hug them. I want to tell them that I can protect you, but I can't because we're going to war with Iran. That's painful. That's deeply painful for me to see a young 21-year-old nice person. We're sending him to war for what? For whose benefit? It's not for our benefit. It's not for Iranians' benefit. Please call your representatives. Please call your senators. They need to hear from us. If they don't hear from us, guess who they're going to hear from? They're going to hear from warmongers. And that's not what we want. Lastly, engage with other people. If we all have the same ideas about things, we're not going to change anything. Step out of your comfort zone. Find a reasonable person that you can have a good discussion. Go back and forth. You're going to learn from them. They're going to learn from you. We can't be in isolation. Isolation is where we are at because of isolating ourselves. We need to step out of our comfort zone and have a real, true discussion. And be out there for finding facts. Facts are important. And we've stepped over facts. We're doing everything based on what we believe and what we feel. But we need facts and we need actions. That's all we need. So I thank you for being here. Please don't forget to vote. Listen to candidates. Candidates, we need to understand what they stand. If they're going to continue the path we've taken for the last God knows how long, or if we're going to go back to peace negotiations. We had a nuclear deal that effectively stopped Iran from developing a nuclear war. We're being lied to. That nuclear deal was so effective that they were actually talking about using that for other deals around the world. But we're being lied to. Which is where we are now. Listen to candidates to see if they're going to go back to that nuclear deal. And vote, obviously. So I thank you for being here. And I hope you can be active. If you can change one mind, each one of you change one mind, you've been effective. And please do it. Thank you.
Woo, hot mic, hot mic. Keep it going for Mojgan, everyone. Really took a lot of courage for her to share her personal story. This is real. This affects people. Millions of people. But she's right in what she said. We can prevent this war. In fact, most of the people of this country are opposed to war with Iran. They absolutely are. But they're too quiet. So we need you, the people who came out to this rally today, to be leaders on this issue. Excuse me, sir, I'm speaking. I can talk to you after. I'll talk to you after. All right.
One thing you forget it, but don't tell it out of me and then forget it.
Yeah. Thank you, Cole. All right, we've gotten some pushback from people in the crowd today, right? People are skeptical about the Iranian government. Yeah, but you know, the best thing to say to them, and I found areas of broad agreement, they don't trust Saudi Arabia. They don't. We got a big banner here that says, "Stop weapons sales to Saudi Arabia." I'm sure most of you know how many Iranians attacked us on 9/11.
Okay.
0.
There you go.
Of the 19 hijackers, how many of them were from Saudi Arabia? 15. The vast majority of them, right? So right now, our military-industrial complex, including a huge company, Raytheon, that's based right here in Massachusetts, they are selling high-tech weaponry and bombs to the Saudis. This is a country that has repeatedly been caught trading American weapons to Al-Qaeda, right? So people out there, none of us support terrorism, even the people who are pushing back today. So let's focus on the broad areas of agreement, right? We need to stop weapons sales to the Middle East. It's not just the bombings. It's not just the invasions and the occupations. We are the #1 arms dealer in the world. The United States is essentially a guy selling guns out of his trunk in a crime-ridden neighborhood. And we expect things to get better? We have been doing this for decades. We have to stop it now. All right, no more war. That's right. So please, Mojgan said it all. You know, it's great that you came out today, but you need to talk to other people.
No more war. No more war. No more war.
Absolutely, that's right. Thank you, sir. No more war. I just got a great tip. Social media, it is a great resource. Please, take pictures, post them, hashtag no war with Iran. Spread the information. You can write letters to the editor in your newspaper. Thousands of people will read what you wrote. There are many articles that need to be responded to. The media is not doing its job. So it's gonna fall to us. All right, I've talked enough. I want to introduce our next speaker. He is the director of the New Democracy Coalition. He's been working on racial justice and reconciliation in the city of Boston, working on renaming Faneuil Hall. Let me bring up Kevin Peterson.
No more war.
No more war! No more war!
No more war. No more war.
No more war!
No more war.
I'm gonna be the mic stand for this one.
Good afternoon. We stand here at this hour, pitched between the possibility of war and the mad militaristic tendencies of our onerous American hegemony. At this hour, the violent propensities of our nation, our penchant for blood as the spoil of conflict based in greed, are poised at the perceived evil of an enemy. At this hour, we shudder in horror and fascination at the destructive capacities to annihilate, our will to obliviate, our resolve to liquidate the sentient life of others in the inglorious waste of the children of women and men. The nearness of war remains present, yet we must pray for peace. We know that the weapons of mass destruction that our American government has planned across the globe can conspire at any moment to reap conflagration and the fury on the innocent. Yet we must pray for peace. Generals and war councils, troops and tanks lay waiting in the foreign theaters to engage the innocent and the unprotected populations of the world with unrelenting violence and conflict. We must pose in a posture of mercy in the name of peace. President Trump, with boasting and bragging, has led our country into the brink of war and into the bowels of bellicosity. His irresponsible rhetoric has angered the nations. Trump has pledged aggression on North Korea. He has pulled away from the global nuclear non-proliferation agreements established under President Obama. He has placed stinging sanctions on Iran. He has angered the nations. And the cost at home is as horrible as it is harmful. We sadly opt for bombs and the security of the rich over butter. Our $700 million war budget is tacitly immoral. It strips away the life opportunities for the poorest and most vulnerable in society. Former President Eisenhower, a war general himself, has said that every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired, signifies in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. We must choose butter and not bombs. Mankind must put an end to war before war puts an end to mankind. We must commit to life and not death, peaceful coexistence, and human flourishing and not spilled blood. When we commit to a nuclear bomb overstock, we are committing to an underinvestment in the future of our youth and those who live at the margins of our social structures. When we opt for war, we ignore our nation's race problem. We ignore our nation's drug problem. We ignore our nation's housing problem. We ignore the issue of wealth inequality. We must choose butter over bombs. Maladjusted militaristic priorities of our nation must be shifted towards the desire for nonviolence, repair, and restorative justice. We can be a better nation, a nation emboldened with the belief that harm in war to anyone is outright harm in our global society to everyone. We are not separate and apart on this planet. The blue celestial orb we call Earth is the possession of us all. We must realize that we live in a world house. Our planet is a shared place and a shared space. Beloved, we must find a way to study war no more. We must put down the lethal weapons, the lethal tools that lead to mass carnage, and lift our eyes to the ancient hills from which come our help of human possibility, from which come the faith that the Almighty has made us with the intention of holiness and hope. Beloved, we must lay down our swords and our shields and stand by the riverside of hope, the riverside of love, the riverside of understanding. If we do this, we will be a better nation. We will be a better people, and we'll study war no more. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it. Woo! Woo! My God. Amen to that. Let's reiterate that. Let's let our love for one another always be our guiding light. Let me pass it off to Chance.
No war on Iran! No war on Iran! No war on Iran! No war Okay, I'm gonna invite up our next speaker now, anti-war activist Anna Milosavljevic.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to see everyone here, and thank you so much for coming out. I want to talk a little bit about Thursday's so-called restraint by President Trump, which some people following this incident claimed proved how anti-war President Trump really is, and that if only Bolton and Pompeo didn't have his ear, we wouldn't be in war all the time. Yeah, let's all laugh at that for a second. Some people also seem to claim that it would be better if President Trump listened to, I don't know, Tucker Carlson. And we, obviously as a group, most of us reject these claims. And despite President Trump's long campaign, disavowing America's endless wars, we've seen that he really is not pro-peace and anti-war. He's approved more troop deployments, more drone strikes, and we've seen week after week, different war profiteers entering and exiting the Pentagon. So it's really obvious he's not anti-war. But to make it even more blatant, late last night on NBC, Trump stated that he doesn't want to go to war, but if we do, Iran will be obliterated. That was a quote, obliterated. And you have to wonder how someone can say President Trump is pro-peace when he follows a statement like, I don't want to go to war with a threat to the entire Iranian population. So it's really clear that people got it really wrong, and it's not our fault. It's really the politicians who claim one thing and they never do it. And we must come together, to reject this kind of thinking that one politician is going to get us out of these wars, because in reality, the corporatocracy in this country would rather millions die, actually billions, to preserve the state of the world right now. So in response to that, really, no matter what 2020 candidates are telling you, understand that there are larger forces at play, and protests like this today are really great ways to reject, this kind of thinking that we can have a hero or a savior in this government. So let's come together to reject a world that allows war and destruction for profit. Let's reject a world that allows a handful of billionaires to control the lives of millions and billions of people around this world. And let's join with our brothers and sisters in Iran and around the world. Thank you.
No more war! 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 All right. This is great. I want to invite up our next speaker, journalist Bina Sarwar. All right.
Hi everybody, thank you all for coming out. Where do I hold it? Close to me? Okay. All right, is that good? Yeah. So, like he said, I'm a journalist, I'm not a public speaker, I'm not somebody who is a leader in activism or anything like that. I am from Pakistan, I'm a journalist, and I do also teach journalism, and one of the things that I teach in journalism to my students is that you have to look at all sides. So a really important point here is that this war hype against Iran is being based on what President Trump calls fake news, right? Everybody thinks that Iran is the aggressor, but guess what? That is not true. And we know that that is not true. So like Ryan said, what can we as people do? What can you as people do when the media is blowing up this Iran war hype? I want to remind us all of another war that we are still bearing the repercussions of. Does anybody remember which one that is? Too many, right? But a really important one that I want to remind us all is the war against Iraq, when the weapons of mass destruction, so-called weapons of mass destruction, were used as an excuse to attack a country that was not the aggressor. Do people remember that war on Iraq that was based on absolutely false news? Who remembers that war on Iraq? Do we know that what we are seeing right now, the birth of Al-Qaeda, is that not directly related to that war? That was based on fake news. And the fake news was published by the New York Times, which apologized later. Thank you very much. But by that time, the damage had been done. The other thing I want to say is that the restraint, that so-called restraint that President Trump is showing, restraint, thank you very much. You are actually hyping up, as the previous speaker said, this kind of war hype, and you are calling it restraint, but it's based again on what? Fake news. And what can we do about that? We can use hashtags, we can use social media, because really right now that seems to be the only space that is available, because I do see some media here, but how much do the media actually report on both sides? I want to also ask, how many people remember that Iran, the democratically elected leader of Iran in 1953, who was overthrown because he nationalized oil? How many people remember that? Mohammad Mossadegh was overthrown in 1953, a democratically elected leader, because he nationalized oil, all right? We are done with the politics of oil, please. I do appreciate that banner back there about Saudi Arabia, stop arms deals to Saudi Arabia. And I want to also say, stop arms deals to Saudi Arabia, stop arms deals anywhere, because stop arms deals. We can make that a hashtag, stop arms deals, because who is benefiting from this war hype? It's the war machinery, right? Because the United States, the only country that has ever dropped nuclear weapons on a population, right? And you're calling for restraint. Thank you very much. And I want to also say that this whole the false premises and as a Pakistani, I just want to flag the war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Pakistan has been the battleground for proxy wars between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and right now the United States is also being used for that proxy war. And guess what? Who is not the aggressor? That is Iran is not the aggressor. Yeah. So I just want to end by saying that war has never been the answer. We have to have dialogue, and I want to end everybody to chant, no more war. No more war. No more war! No more war! Hands off Iran! Hands off Iran! Hands off Iran! Thank you. And the sanctions! Yeah, sorry, that's a really important point. I just want to, make that one more point, and that relates to the war on Iraq. When thousands and thousands of people were killed, and Madeleine Albright at that point, when she was asked about the children who were killed, was it worth it? And she said, well, yes, it was worth it. No, it's not worth it. And it was based on fake news. So thank you very much.
All right, let's give it up. Okay, so the plan right now, we're gonna have one more speaker, Nina Allen from CodePink, who went to a trip to Iran last year, I believe. And then we're gonna take a group picture, and then we're gonna take to the streets.
I'd like to speak for a minute after that.
All right, Nina.
Yeah, Nina.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I am here as someone who went on a peace delegation to Iran just last February, early March. So it's only been a few months since I was there. The delegation was organized by CodePink. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. All right, I'll just begin quickly again. I am here as a representative of a peace delegation organized by CodePink that went to Iran in February and early March. And that was, only a few months ago. 28 of us received visas, which was no small risk for Iran. They are concerned that CIA spies, will try to enter their country, and they had to satisfy themselves, so we weren't spies. Once they did, they were incredibly hospitable to us. They did not place piles of restrictions on what we could do or who we could talk to. We talked to, of course, government officials, journalists, NGOs, and anybody on the street who wanted to talk to us. I will reinforce what several speakers have said, which is that Iranians really like Americans. They do want to take selfies with us. They really do. And they're extremely friendly and positive towards Americans. It is American policies that they have trouble with. Now, the single most, I would say, message that they wanted us to take back to the United States is they really wanted the sanctions to be removed. That was extremely important. Now, of course, the sanctions affect the poorest, most vulnerable people in this society the most. I saw a line of people who were waiting to receive a discount chicken from the government. There are people who cannot afford to buy food, and that is due both to the sanctions and to the very high inflation. Now, our group was also affected by the sanctions, but before I tell this story, I want to make clear that if American visitors had problems with the sanctions, that the Iranian people have so much more of a problem with these sanctions. But our story is that one of the members of our group had a medical emergency. It turned out that he had a heart problem and had to be rushed to the hospital. The doctors determined that he needed to have surgery, an angioplasty, and they couldn't perform the surgery because his insurance company back in the United States could not pay for it. Iranians cannot have banking relations with any American bank. So he couldn't have the operation until after a great many negotiations, he managed to get a loan from the Swiss embassy. And that way he could have the operation. It was successful, and he did get to go home. Now, again, this was a problem that we resolved. It's much worse for Iranians. Now, another highlight of this trip, among many, was that we talked to Mohammad Zarif, who is the foreign minister in Iran. He was the man who helped negotiate the nuclear deal along with John Kerry and the other 5 nations. So he's very familiar with this situation. Now, Iranians themselves, from my understanding, is about 80% of Iranians were thrilled with the negotiation. We're thrilled with the success. They believed that as a result of the deal, that sanctions would be lifted and that this would be opening of better relations with the U.S. When Trump pulled out, the inevitable reaction was, you cannot trust the United States. And the enthusiasm for this deal, this nuclear deal, plummeted. I would say that what Trump has done is playing into the hardliners who say the United States can never be trusted. Now, among the things that Zarif said, and I'm going to read a quote, short quote, that was part of his remarks, and I think it corresponds to many of the things that were actually said here. All right, here is the quote. Directly from him, he speaks English, so this is not a translation. I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying that we do not have excesses. I'm saying the reason for U.S. to turn against us was our decision to be independent. Not that we had violations of human rights, not that we had other problems. These may be right, but I told our friends that if human rights is a defining factor, why is everybody having such a cozy relationship with Saudi Arabia? And he finishes out by saying, particularly after the Khashoggi incident. So I think that when we want to understand what the United States is doing in trying to provoke a war with Iran, that we have to consider the fact that Iran's independence, just independence, not wanting to be under the domination of a foreign power, is considered a threat by the U.S. And I hope the issue is resolved. I hope there is no war. I think we all are, and I think the most we can do is keep on with the rallies, with the contacting of congresspersons, and trying to build a peace movement.
End the sanctions!
End the sanctions now! End the sanctions now! End the sanctions now!
Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Imperialist wars have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Imperialist wars have got to go! Hey! Ho, ho! Imperialism has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Imperialism has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Imperialism has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Imperialism has got to go! Imperialism has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Imperialism has got to go! No war with Iran! No war with Iran! No war with Iran! The sanctions are murder! End the sanctions now! The sanctions are murder! End the sanctions now! Imperialism's got to go! Ho-ho! Imperialism's got to go! Imperialism's got to go! No more war! 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 The sanctions are murder! And the sanctions now! The sanctions